The fire in the great hall roared higher than it should have, as if it too could sense that something terrible was about to happen. Elena Voss stood at the center of the stone floor, her hands trembling at her sides, while hundreds of eyes bored into her from every direction. She had waited her whole life for this moment, and now that it had finally come, she wished the ground would open up and swallow her whole. Alpha King Draven Ashcombe stood 3 steps above her on the raised platform, his broad shoulders framed by torchlight, his jaw locked tight. He was the kind of man who commanded a room simply by breathing in it. Every wolf in Halloridge knew his name, feared his temper, and respected his strength. And now his amber eyes were fixed on Elena with an intensity that made her stomach twist into painful knots. The pack elders had gathered around the hall in a wide circle, their robes dark, their faces unreadable. This was the mate-claiming ceremony, the ritual every wolf both longed for and dreaded. Because once a mate bond was declared, there was no undoing it. Fate chose the pair. The wolf inside each person recognized its other half through scent and instinct, a pull so powerful that most considered it sacred. Elena had felt that pull the moment Draven walked into the hall. It hit her like a wave crashing against rock, knocking the breath from her lungs. Her wolf howled inside her chest, desperate and joyful, recognizing him instantly as her mate. She saw the same flicker of recognition cross his face, the widening of his eyes, the sudden stillness in his body. For one heartbeat, the entire hall seemed to hold its breath with them. Then reality crashed back in. Elena was an Omega. In Halloridge, Omegas ranked lowest among all wolves, seen as gentle, quiet, and unworthy of leadership. They served the pack in small ways, tending gardens, caring for children, mending clothes. They did not marry kings. They did not sit beside alphas on thrones. The idea was almost laughable to the council members watching from the shadows, and Elena could already hear their hushed voices rising like a swarm of bees. She looked up at Draven, silently begging him with her eyes to say something, anything, that would calm the storm gathering around them. Instead, his expression hardened. His father, the old king, lay dying in his chambers at that very moment, and his final wish had been clear. Draven must marry someone worthy of the throne, someone from a powerful bloodline who could strengthen alliances between packs. An Omega with no family name, no title, no wealth, could never fulfill that role. Elena watched something break behind Draven's eyes, a flicker of grief and duty crushing whatever tenderness had sparked in him moments before. "She is not my mate," Draven said, his voice booming across the hall, cold and final. "I reject this bond." The words struck Elena like physical blows. She felt her knees threaten to buckle, but she forced herself to stay upright, refusing to give the watching crowd the satisfaction of seeing her collapse. Whispers erupted immediately, some cruel, some pitying, all of them unbearable. She caught snippets of conversation floating through the hall, voices calling her pathetic, calling her a disgrace, wondering aloud how an Omega could have dared to hope for something so far above her station. Elena kept her chin high, though her vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. She would not cry in front of these people. She would not give them that. Draven did not look at her again. He turned and descended from the platform, disappearing through a side door with his personal guard trailing behind him, leaving Elena standing alone in the middle of the hall, exposed and humiliated, while the fire continued to crackle behind her like it was mocking her heartbreak. She did not remember walking out of the hall. She did not remember the long corridor back to the small cottage she shared with her aunt near the edge of the packlands. She only remembered arriving at her door, sliding down against the wood, and finally letting the tears come, silent and shaking, while the night wind howled outside like it understood her pain. Her aunt, Margaret, found her there an hour later. She was a stern woman, with kind eyes, the only family Elena had left since her parents disappeared when she was a child. Margaret did not ask questions. She simply wrapped a blanket around Elena's shoulders and sat beside her on the cold floor, saying nothing, letting her niece cry until there were no tears left. "He rejected me," Elena finally whispered, her voice raw, in front of everyone. Margaret's jaw tightened, though she kept her tone gentle. "Some men mistake duty for wisdom," she said. "It does not make them right." Elena laughed bitterly, the sound hollow in the quiet room. "It does not matter if he is right. He is the king. What he says becomes truth, whether it deserves to be or not." Margaret helped her up and guided her to bed, tucking the blanket around her like she used to when Elena was a small girl frightened of storms. But this storm was different. This one lived inside her chest, and no blanket could keep it away. Sleep did not come easily that night. Elena lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over. The way Draven's eyes had softened before hardening again. The way his voice had cracked slightly before he forced it steady. Somewhere deep inside, she suspected he had not wanted to reject her, but suspecting it did not lessen the pain of hearing those words spoken aloud before the entire pack. By morning, exhaustion had settled into something quieter, something more like resolve. Elena rose before dawn, dressed in simple clothes, and began packing a small bag. She could not stay in Hallow Ridge. Not after what happened. The pack would never let her forget her humiliation. Every glance, every whisper, every pitying smile would be a fresh wound. She needed to leave, to start somewhere new, somewhere no one knew her name or her shame. As she packed, her fingers brushed against the fabric covering her lower back, and she paused, feeling the familiar warmth beneath her skin, where her birthmark sat hidden. It was a strange mark, shaped like intertwining branches curling into a circle, dark against her pale skin. She had carried it since birth, though she barely remembered a time when it did not occasionally tingle or burn faintly, especially during moments of fear or danger. Her aunt had always told her to keep it covered, to never let anyone see it, warning her that some marks brought unwanted attention, unwanted questions. Elena had grown up believing it was simply an oddity, perhaps even something shameful, much like everything else about her life that seemed to set her apart from other wolves. She had learned to live with covered shoulders and high collars, never once imagining the mark meant anything beyond her own private embarrassment. She finished packing, just as the sun began rising over the tree line, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. Margaret stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching her with concern. "You do not have to run," Margaret said quietly. "I am not running," Elena replied, though even she heard the lie in her own voice. "I am simply leaving before they force me out anyway." Margaret did not argue further, though the worry in her eyes remained. She helped Elena secure her bag and walked her to the edge of their small property, embracing her tightly before letting go. "Be careful," Margaret whispered. "The woods beyond our border are not always safe." Elena nodded, forcing a small, brave smile. "I will be fine. I always am." She turned and began walking toward the tree line, each step carrying her further from the life she had known, from the humiliation she had suffered, from the king who had shattered her heart in front of an entire hall of witnesses. The forest swallowed her slowly, sunlight filtering through the leaves in golden beams, birds calling out overhead as if nothing terrible had happened the night before. For a while, walking helped clear her mind. The rhythmic crunch of leaves beneath her boots, the fresh scent of pine and earth, the distant sound of a stream somewhere nearby, all of it offered a small comfort. She told herself she would find a new pack eventually, somewhere far from Hallow Ridge, somewhere she could start over without the weight of rejection following her like a shadow. But the deeper she walked, the more the forest seemed to shift around her. The birds fell silent, the wind stilled. A prickling sensation crawled up her spine, the same warning instinct every wolf carried deep in their bones, the one that whispered danger before the mind could fully understand why. Elena stopped walking, her senses sharpening as she scanned the trees around her. Something was wrong. She could feel it, a heaviness in the air, a stillness that did not belong in a living forest. Her heart began to pound, her wolf stirring uneasily beneath her skin, urging her to run, to hide, to do anything except stand still in the open. A twig snapped somewhere to her left. She spun toward the sound, eyes wide, breath catching in her throat. For a moment, she saw nothing but shadows shifting between the trees. Then a pair of glowing eyes emerged from the darkness, followed by another and another. Rogue wolves, unclaimed by any pack, feared throughout the region for their unpredictable and often dangerous nature. They lived beyond the boundaries of civilized packs, answering to no laws, no alphas, no codes of honor. Elena's blood turned cold. She was alone, unarmed, and far from help. The largest of the rogues stepped forward, his fur matted and gray, his lips curling back to reveal sharp teeth glistening in the dim light filtering through the canopy above. He circled her slowly, sniffing the air, sensing her fear the way predators always could. 2 more rogues emerged from the underbrush, flanking her on either side, cutting off any hope of escape. Elena's mind raced. She could shift, but she had never been trained for combat, not the way alphas and warriors were. Omegas were taught to avoid conflict, to hide, to survive through cleverness rather than strength. Against 3 rogue wolves, cleverness alone might not be enough. She backed away slowly, her hands raised, though she knew the gesture meant nothing to wolves, driven by hunger and instinct. The largest rogue lunged first, and Elena barely managed to dive out of the way, rolling across the forest floor as sharp claws grazed dangerously close to her side. Pain flared along her arm, where fabric tore and skin scraped against rough bark. She scrambled to her feet, heart hammering, adrenaline surging through her veins. The second rogue circled behind her, cutting off her retreat, while the third crouched low, ready to pounce. Elena knew she could not outrun 3 wolves, not without shifting, and even then, her chances remained slim against opponents clearly more experienced in violence than she had ever been. She let her wolf take over, feeling her body shift painfully but quickly, bones rearranging, fur sprouting along her skin, senses sharpening into something wild and desperate. Her wolf form was smaller than most, built for speed and agility rather than brute strength, a reflection of her omega status even in her most primal form. But speed might be exactly what saved her now. She darted between 2 trees, just as the largest rogue lunged again, narrowly avoiding his snapping jaws. She could hear the others closing in from different angles, their paws pounding against the forest floor, their growls echoing through the trees like a chorus of impending doom. Elena's lungs burned as she pushed herself faster, weaving through the dense forest, branches whipping against her fur, her mind screaming at her to keep moving, to not look back, to survive. But rogue wolves were relentless hunters, and no matter how fast she ran, she could sense them gaining ground behind her. Suddenly, the ground gave way beneath her paws, a hidden dip in the terrain sending her tumbling down a small embankment. She landed hard, pain shooting through her side as she scrambled to regain her footing. Before she could rise fully, the largest rogue appeared at the top of the embankment, eyes gleaming with cruel satisfaction, as he prepared to leap. This was it, Elena thought, her heart pounding with terror. This was how it would end, alone in an unfamiliar forest, far from home, far from anyone who might help her. Then, from somewhere deep in the trees, a powerful roar shattered the silence, followed by the thunderous sound of another wolf, crashing through the underbrush, at incredible speed. Elena barely had time to register the new arrival, before a massive dark shape collided with the rogue at the top of the embankment, sending both wolves tumbling backward, in a violent clash of teeth and claws. Elena stumbled backward, watching in stunned disbelief, as the newcomer fought with ferocious skill, his movements precise and powerful, clearly the work of someone trained for battle since birth. The remaining rogues hesitated, sensing they had suddenly become outmatched, before turning and fleeing deeper into the forest, disappearing as quickly as they had arrived. The large dark wolf stood over the fallen rogue for a moment, chest heaving, before the injured wolf too scrambled up and fled, leaving Elena alone with her unexpected rescuer. Her heart still pounding from the encounter, Elena watched as the dark wolf turned toward her, his golden eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that felt disturbingly familiar. Recognition slammed into her chest before her mind could fully process what she was seeing. It could not be. The wolf began to shift, fur receding, bones cracking back into human form, until Draven Ashcombe stood before her, in the fading afternoon light, breathing hard, his chest and arms marked with fresh scratches from the fight. His eyes widened as he took in her presence, clearly just as shocked to find her here as she was to see him. "You," he said, his voice rough with disbelief. Elena, still in her wolf form, backed away instinctively, unwilling to shift back and face him after everything that happened the night before. But her body trembled with exhaustion and lingering fear, and before she could stop herself, she felt her form shifting back as well, clothes torn from her earlier fall, revealing more skin than she would have liked. Draven's eyes darted away respectfully at first, a gentleman's instinct even in such a chaotic moment. But as Elena turned slightly to gather her torn shirt around herself, something on her exposed lower back caught his attention, and his entire body went rigid. His eyes locked onto the mark on her skin, the strange branching design she had spent her whole life hiding beneath layers of fabric. The color drained from his face. His breath caught audibly in his throat. "That mark," he whispered, taking a step closer despite himself. "Where did you get that mark?" Elena instinctively covered her back with trembling hands, confusion and exhaustion warring within her. "I was born with it," she said carefully. "Why does it matter?" Draven did not answer immediately. He simply stared at her, his expression shifting through disbelief, fear, and something that looked strangely like recognition, as though he were seeing a ghost step out of legend and into flesh before his very eyes. The forest around them fell silent once more, holding its breath alongside them, waiting to see what would happen next. "It matters," Draven finally said, his voice barely above a whisper, "more than you could possibly imagine." Elena stared at him, her mind spinning with too many questions to voice at once. Only hours ago, this man had stood on a raised platform and rejected her in front of the entire pack, his words cold enough to freeze the blood in her veins. Now he stood before her in a quiet forest clearing, his eyes wide with something that looked almost like fear, staring at a mark she had spent her whole life trying to hide from the world. "You should not be out here alone," Draven said suddenly, shaking himself out of whatever thought had gripped him. His voice returned to its usual commanding tone, though something beneath it still trembled slightly. "The forest beyond Hallow Ridge is not safe, especially not for someone traveling without protection." "I did not ask for your protection," Elena replied, her voice sharper than she intended. Exhaustion and lingering fear from the attack made her words come out harsher than usual, but she found she did not care. "You made it very clear last night that I am not worthy of your concern." Something flickered across Draven's face, a shadow of regret quickly masked by his usual composed expression. "That was different," he said quietly. "Was it?" Elena wrapped her torn shirt tighter around herself, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she looked standing in the middle of the forest, scraped and bruised, her dignity in tatters, just like her clothing. "You rejected me in front of everyone I know. You made me a laughingstock. And now you expect me to simply forget that because you happened to save me from rogue wolves?" Draven's jaw tightened, though he did not look away from her. "I do not expect you to forget anything," he said. "But right now, your safety matters more than either of our pride. Let me take you back to Hallow Ridge." "No," Elena said immediately, the word escaping before she could stop it. "I am not going back there. Not after what happened." "Elena, you do not get to say my name like that," she snapped, cutting him off, though her voice cracked slightly on the last word. "Not after everything." Draven fell silent, watching her with an expression she could not quite read. For a long moment, neither of them spoke, the forest around them slowly returning to its usual sounds, birds calling softly overhead, wind rustling gently through the leaves, as if the earlier danger had never happened at all. Finally Draven spoke again, his voice quieter now, almost gentle. "The mark on your back is not an ordinary birthmark," he said. "It matches something from an old story my father used to tell me, something I always believed was nothing more than legend, but seeing it with my own eyes changes things." Elena frowned, curiosity slowly overtaking her anger despite herself. "What story?" Draven hesitated, glancing around the forest as though worried someone might be listening, though they appeared completely alone. "Not here," he said finally. "Oh, this is not something to discuss in the open, especially not after rogue wolves nearly attacked you. Please, let me at least escort you somewhere safe. After that, if you still wish to leave Hallow Ridge forever, I will not stop you." Elena studied him carefully, searching his face for any sign of deception. She found none, only a strange, urgent seriousness that unsettled her more than his earlier rejection had. Against her better judgment, curiosity and exhaustion finally won out over her pride. "Fine," she said quietly, "but this does not mean I forgive you." "I would never ask you to forgive me so easily," Draven replied, something almost like relief passing briefly across his features. They walked together through the quieting forest, an awkward silence settling between them, as the sun continued its slow descent toward the horizon. Elena kept a careful distance, her arms wrapped protectively around herself, while Draven walked close enough to intervene should danger appear again, though he was careful not to crowd her. As they walked, Elena's mind returned again and again to the mark on her back, to the fear she had seen in Draven's eyes when he first noticed it. She had spent her entire life believing that mark meant nothing beyond her own personal shame, something to hide, something unwanted. But the way Draven had looked at her, the way his voice had trembled when he spoke of old stories and legends, suggested something far more significant than she had ever imagined. For the first time since the rejection ceremony, a small flicker of something other than heartbreak stirred within her, a quiet, cautious curiosity about what truths might be waiting just beyond the edge of her understanding. They walked in silence for nearly an hour, the forest gradually thinning until the outline of a small stone cabin appeared through the trees, tucked away from any main paths, clearly built for privacy. Draven explained quietly that it belonged to his family, used sometimes as a resting point during long patrols, and that no one else would know they were there. Inside, the cabin was simple but clean, a small fireplace along one wall, a wooden table, and 2 chairs. Draven lit the fire quickly, the warmth spreading through the small space as shadows danced across the stone walls. Elena sat carefully at the table, still cautious, still guarded, watching him with wary eyes as he prepared to finally explain what he knew. "Before I say anything else," Draven began, sitting across from her, his expression unusually serious, "I need you to understand that what I am about to tell you will sound impossible. I barely believe it myself, and I have seen the proof with my own eyes." Elena straightened slightly, bracing herself. "Just tell me," she said. Draven took a slow breath, his golden eyes reflecting the firelight, as he finally began to speak of legends long buried, of bloodlines thought extinct, and of a mark that was never meant to appear again. The fire crackled softly between them, as Draven leaned forward, his elbows resting on the wooden table, his eyes fixed on Elena, with an intensity that made her feel like the only person in the world. Outside, the wind had picked up, rustling through the trees surrounding the small cabin, but inside, the air felt heavy with anticipation. "Long before Halleridge existed," Draven began, "before any of the packs we know today were formed, there was a single bloodline that ruled over all wolves. They were called the First Wolves, said to be born directly from the moon itself, carrying power no ordinary wolf could match. They could heal wounds with a touch, calm raging storms, and unite packs that had fought each other for generations." Elena listened, captivated despite her lingering distrust, the warmth of the fire slowly easing the tension in her shoulders. "According to the old stories," Draven continued, "the first wolves eventually vanished, their bloodlines scattered and hidden to protect them from enemies who wanted to steal their power for themselves. My father used to say that one day, a descendant would return, marked by the ancient symbol of the first wolves, a symbol shaped exactly like the one on your back." Elena's hand instinctively moved toward her lower back, though the fabric of her shirt still covered the mark. "That cannot be real," she said quietly. "I am no one. I have no family name, no title, nothing that suggests I come from some powerful bloodline." "That is exactly what makes this so strange," Draven admitted. "The old texts say the bloodline hid itself deliberately, blending into ordinary life, erasing any trace of its origins, to avoid detection. If you truly are a descendant, it would explain why your family history seems so unclear." Elena thought of her parents, who had vanished when she was young, leaving her in her aunt's care without explanation. She had always assumed they simply abandoned her, unable to handle the responsibilities of raising a child. But now, sitting across from Draven in this quiet cabin, a new and unsettling possibility began to take shape in her mind. "You think my parents were hiding something," she said slowly. Draven nodded. "It is possible. If they knew about your bloodline, they may have gone into hiding to protect you, or they may have been taken by someone who discovered the truth before they could." A chill ran down Elena's spine at the thought. She had spent years believing her parents simply did not want her, that she was unwanted and unworthy, even before the rejection ceremony had confirmed those fears in front of the entire pack. But if Draven was right, the truth might be far more complicated and far more dangerous than simple abandonment. "Even if this is true," Elena said, trying to steady her voice, "why does it matter now? Why did you reject me last night, if you suspected any of this?" Draven's expression darkened slightly, guilt flashing across his features. "I did not know about the mark until today," he admitted. "Last night, all I knew was that my father lay dying, and his final wish was for me to secure an alliance through marriage. The council would never have accepted an Omega as queen, not without proof of a powerful bloodline. I acted out of fear and duty, not truth. I regretted it the moment the words left my mouth. Elena studied him carefully, searching for any sign of dishonesty, but found only quiet, aching sincerity in his golden eyes. Still, the memory of her humiliation remained fresh and painful, and she was not ready to simply forgive him because of a convenient discovery. "Regret does not undo what you did," she said firmly. "No," Draven agreed softly. "It does not. But I am asking you to let me try to make it right, starting with keeping you safe, until we understand what this mark truly means." Elena crossed her arms, considering his words carefully. Part of her wanted to walk away, to continue on her original path far from Halloridge and everyone associated with her humiliation. But another part of her, the curious, cautious part that had always wondered about her missing parents and her strange hidden mark, wanted answers more than she wanted to run. "If I agree to stay," she said slowly, "it is only to learn the truth about this mark, nothing more." "Understood," Draven replied, relief evident in his voice. They sat in silence for a while longer, the fire slowly dying down, as exhaustion finally caught up with both of them. Draven offered Elena the small bed in the corner of the cabin, insisting he would keep watch through the night, in case the rogue wolves returned, or any other danger approached. Elena hesitated at first, still wary of trusting him completely, but exhaustion eventually won out, and she allowed herself to rest. Sleep came slowly, her mind still racing with questions about her mysterious bloodline, her missing parents, and the strange twist of fate that had brought her back into contact with the man who broke her heart just hours earlier. But beneath the fear and uncertainty, a small ember of hope flickered quietly within her, the possibility that her life might hold more meaning than she had ever dared to imagine. She woke sometime before dawn to the sound of Draven's quiet voice, speaking to someone outside the cabin. Careful not to make a sound, Elena crept toward the small window, peering out into the pale pre-dawn light. Draven stood a short distance away, speaking urgently to a messenger wolf, who had apparently arrived during the night. "The council cannot know she is here," Draven said firmly, his voice low but tense. "Not until we understand more about the mark." The messenger nodded, though his expression remained troubled. "Elder Mira requests your presence immediately," he said. "She says it concerns matters too important to delay." Draven's shoulders tightened. "I will come at first light," he replied. "Tell her to prepare everything she knows about the first wolf bloodline." The messenger disappeared into the trees, leaving Draven alone in the quiet clearing, his expression heavy with concern. Elena stepped back from the window, her heart pounding with a mixture of anxiety and curiosity. Whatever this Elder Mira knew, it seemed to matter a great deal, and Elena found herself desperate to understand the truth about the mark that had shaped her entire life, without her ever realizing it. When Draven returned inside, he found Elena already awake, sitting at the small table with her arms crossed, waiting for him. "You spoke with a messenger," she said, not bothering to pretend she had not overheard. Draven sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Elder Mira is the oldest historian in Halloridge," he explained. "If anyone knows the truth about the first wolf bloodline, it will be her." "Then let us go to her," Elena said, standing up with newfound determination. "I want answers, and I want them now." Draven studied her for a moment, something like admiration flickering behind his eyes. "Very well," he said finally, "but we must be careful. If the council learns about your mark before we understand its true meaning, they may try to use you for their own purposes, or worse, see you as a threat to be eliminated." Elena's stomach tightened at the warning, but she refused to let fear stop her now. She had spent her entire life hiding, staying quiet, accepting whatever scraps of acceptance the world offered her. For the first time, she felt something stronger stirring within her, a determination to understand who she truly was, regardless of the danger that understanding might bring. They left the cabin as the sun began rising over the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of gold and pink. Elena walked beside Draven, her earlier exhaustion replaced by cautious anticipation, her mind racing with questions she hoped Elder Mira could finally answer. Whatever truth awaited her, she was ready to face it, no matter how impossible or dangerous it might prove to be. As they made their way through the forest toward Halloridge, neither of them noticed the pair of eyes watching from the shadows, tracking their every move with quiet, calculated interest. The walk to Hallow Ridge took longer than Elena expected, the forest paths winding through thick clusters of trees, before finally opening onto familiar territory. She felt her chest tighten as the wooden walls of the pack settlement came into view, memories of the previous night's humiliation flooding back with painful clarity. Every guard posted along the entrance, every villager going about their morning routines, seemed to represent another potential witness to her shame. Draven noticed her hesitation and slowed his pace beside her. "We will avoid the main square," he said quietly. Elder Mira's home is on the eastern edge of the settlement. Few people travel that way this early. Elena nodded, grateful for his consideration, though she still felt exposed walking beside the man who had rejected her so publicly. She kept her hood raised, her eyes low, following Draven through narrow side paths that wound between smaller cottages and gardens still glistening with morning dew. They arrived at a modest stone house, tucked beneath a canopy of ancient oak trees, its wooden door carved with intricate symbols Elena did not recognize. Draven knocked twice, and moments later, the door opened to reveal an elderly woman with silver hair pulled back into a tight braid, her sharp eyes immediately settling on Elena with unmistakable interest. "So," the woman said, her voice carrying the weight of decades of knowledge, "this is the one who carries the mark." "Elder Mira," Draven said respectfully, stepping aside to allow Elena entry. "Thank you for seeing us so quickly." Elder Mira waved off his gratitude, gesturing for them both to enter. Her home was filled with shelves of ancient books, scrolls, and strange artifacts, collected over what appeared to be a lifetime of study. Elena felt small and out of place amid such accumulated wisdom, though Elder Mira's gaze held no judgment, only intense curiosity. "Show me," Elder Mira said simply, once they were seated around a small table cluttered with old texts. Elena hesitated only briefly, before turning slightly, and lifting the back of her shirt just enough to reveal the mark. Elder Mira leaned forward, examining it closely, her weathered fingers hovering just above the skin without touching it, as though afraid the mark might react to contact. "Remarkable," she whispered, almost to herself. "After all these years, I never truly believed I would see it with my own eyes." "What is it exactly?" Elena asked, straightening her shirt and turning back to face the elder woman. Elder Mira sat back, her expression thoughtful. "This symbol has appeared in our oldest texts for centuries, always tied to the same legend. It represents the bond between the first wolves and the moon itself, a mark passed down only through direct descendants of that original, sacred bloodline. Its bearer was said to hold power, capable of uniting fractured packs, healing deep wounds, both physical and spiritual, and standing against threats no ordinary wolf could face alone." Elena absorbed this information slowly, her mind struggling to reconcile the woman Elder Mira described with the quiet, unremarkable life she had always known. "I have never shown any unusual abilities," she said. "I am not strong. I am not skilled in combat. I am simply an Omega who mends clothes and tends gardens." "Power does not always announce itself immediately," Elder Mira replied gently. "Sometimes it lies dormant, waiting for the right circumstances to awaken. The old texts suggest the mark itself often reacts before the bearer fully understands their own potential, growing warm during moments of danger, or reacting strongly in the presence of a true mate." Elena's cheeks flushed slightly at the mention of mates, memories of the rejection ceremony resurfacing uncomfortably. She glanced briefly at Draven, who remained quiet, his expression unreadable, though his eyes never left her face. "There is something else you should know," Elder Mira continued, her tone growing more serious. "If word spreads that a descendant of the first wolves has been found, certain factions within our world may see this as either a tremendous opportunity or a significant threat. Some would wish to protect and support you. Others may see you as a danger to their own ambitions, someone to be controlled or eliminated entirely." A cold shiver ran down Elena's spine at the warning. Why would anyone see me as a threat? I have no desire for power or control over anyone. "Desire has little to do with it," Elder Mira said grimly. "Perception often matters more than truth. Those who fear losing their influence may act out of fear alone, regardless of your true intentions." Draven finally spoke, his voice firm and protective. "That is why we must keep this discovery contained for now. at least until we better understand the full scope of what Elena's abilities might entail. Elder Mira nodded in agreement, though her expression remained troubled. I will continue researching the old texts for more information, she said. In the meantime, I strongly advise caution. Trust few, reveal nothing, and remain close to those who can protect you. Elena felt the weight of the elder's words settle heavily upon her shoulders. The fragile hope she had begun to feel, now tangled with fresh uncertainty and fear. Just hours ago, her greatest concern had been surviving public humiliation and starting a new, quiet life, far from Hallowridge. Now she found herself caught in the middle of ancient legends, hidden bloodlines, and unknown dangers she barely understood. As they prepared to leave Elder Mira's home, the old woman placed a gentle hand on Elena's arm, her sharp eyes softening slightly. Whatever burdens this legacy brings, she said quietly, know that it also carries great strength, even if you cannot yet feel it within yourself. Trust in what you are capable of becoming. Elena nodded, though uncertainty still churned within her stomach, as she and Draven stepped back out into the cool morning air. The settlement around them continued its usual routines, oblivious to the extraordinary conversation that had just taken place within Elder Mira's quiet home. Elena glanced up at Draven, finding him watching her with an expression that mixed concern, determination, and something else she could not quite name. What happens now? She asked softly. Now, Draven replied, his voice steady despite the uncertainty surrounding them both. We make sure you stay safe, while we figure out exactly what this all means. Elena studied him carefully, remembering the pain of his rejection just hours earlier, yet finding herself unable to ignore the sincerity in his voice now. Whatever complicated path lay ahead, she realized there was no turning back from the truth she had just uncovered. Her life, once defined by quiet insignificance, had suddenly become something far more complex, dangerous, and uncertain than she ever could have imagined. News of Elena's return spread through Hallowridge faster than either she or Draven anticipated. By the time they reached the central estate where the Pack Council convened, a small crowd had already gathered near the gates, drawn by whispered rumors that the rejected Omega had returned in the company of the king himself. Elena kept her eyes forward, her spine straight, refusing to let the murmurs and stares shake her resolve. Draven's personal guard met them at the entrance, falling into formation around them without a word, their expressions carefully neutral though their eyes betrayed curiosity. Elena had never been inside the main estate before. The stone corridors stretched high overhead, lined with tapestries depicting past kings and significant moments in Hallowridge history, each one a reminder of how far removed her own life had always been from this world of power and legacy. Draven led her to a private wing on the eastern side of the estate, away from the council chambers and the more heavily trafficked areas. You will stay here, he said, gesturing toward a set of rooms far grander than anything Elena had ever known. It is close enough that I can ensure your safety, but private enough to avoid unnecessary attention. Elena stepped inside cautiously, taking in the tall windows overlooking a quiet garden, the soft furnishings, the sense of space so different from the small cottage she shared with her aunt. Part of her wanted to protest, to insist she did not need such extravagant protection, but exhaustion and the lingering fear from the rogue attack convinced her to accept, at least for now. Thank you, she said quietly, though the words felt strange on her tongue after everything that had happened between them. Draven nodded, his expression unreadable. I will post guards outside your door, he said. Please, do not leave the estate grounds without informing me first. Until we understand the full extent of the danger you may be in, I cannot risk anything happening to you. Elena bristled slightly at the implication of restriction, memories of feeling controlled and dismissed, still fresh from the rejection ceremony. I am not a prisoner, she said firmly. No, Draven agreed quickly, something like guilt flashing across his face. You are not. But please understand, the threat is real, and I could not forgive myself if something happened to you, because I failed to take proper precautions. Elena studied him for a long moment, searching for any sign of the cold, dismissive king who had rejected her so publicly just the night before. Instead, she found only quiet sincerity, and despite herself, she found her anger softening slightly, though her guarded heart remained far from fully trusting him. Fine, she said finally, but I expect honesty from you, always. No more secrets. No more decisions made about my life without my knowledge. Agreed, Draven replied without hesitation. Over the following days, Elena settled into an uneasy routine within the estate. She rarely left her private wing, wary of the curious and sometimes hostile glances from council members and pack officials who had somehow learned of her presence, despite Draven's efforts at discretion. Word of her mysterious mark had not yet spread beyond a small circle of trusted individuals, but whispers about her sudden reappearance and her unusual proximity to the king traveled quickly nonetheless. Draven visited her often, sometimes to discuss updates from Elder Mira's ongoing research, sometimes simply to check on her well-being. Their conversations remained cautious at first, each of them carefully avoiding the deeper emotional wounds still lingering between them. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, something began shifting in the careful distance they maintained. One evening, nearly a week after her arrival at the estate, Elena found herself unable to sleep, her mind restless with questions about her uncertain future. She wandered quietly through the moonlit garden outside her rooms, the cool night air offering a small measure of comfort after days spent confined indoors. She had not expected to find Draven there as well, seated on a stone bench near a small fountain, apparently lost in his own thoughts. He looked up as she approached, surprise flickering briefly across his features, before settling into something softer. "Could not sleep either?" he asked. Elena hesitated before sitting on the opposite end of the bench, maintaining careful distance between them. "Too many thoughts," she admitted. "About my parents, about the mark, about everything that has happened since the ceremony." Draven nodded, understanding evident in his expression. "I imagine it must feel overwhelming," he said. "Discovering your entire life may have been built upon secrets you never knew existed." "It is more than overwhelming," Elena said quietly. "It is terrifying. I spent years believing I understood my place in the world, however small and insignificant that place seemed. Now everything feels uncertain." Draven was quiet for a moment, watching the moonlight reflect off the fountain's gently rippling water. "I understand uncertainty better than you might think," he said eventually. "My entire life has been dictated by duty and expectation. Every decision measured against what is best for the pack, rather than what I might actually want. Sometimes I wonder if I even know who I am, beyond the role I was born into." Elena glanced at him, surprised by the vulnerability in his admission. For the first time since the rejection ceremony, she saw not the cold, commanding Alpha King, but simply a man burdened by responsibilities far heavier than most could imagine. "Is that why you rejected me?" she asked softly. "Duty and expectation?" Draven's jaw tightened, though he did not look away from her. "Yes," he admitted, "and I have regretted it every moment since." Elena studied him carefully, the sincerity in his voice slowly chipping away at the walls she had built around her heart since that painful night. She was not ready to fully forgive him, not yet, but something within her softened nonetheless, a small crack forming in the armor of anger and hurt she had carried since the ceremony. "I am not asking you to forgive me," Draven continued quietly. "I only hope, in time, you might come to trust me again, even if only a little." Elena did not respond immediately, her gaze drifting toward the moonlit garden surrounding them. The silence between them felt different than before, less tense, more contemplative, as though something fragile but meaningful had begun to grow amid the wreckage of their earlier encounter. "Time," she finally said, "is something I suppose we both have, at least for now." Draven's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile, the first genuine expression of warmth Elena had seen from him since their initial, ill-fated meeting. It was a small gesture, barely noticeable, yet it lingered in Elena's mind long after she finally returned to her rooms that night, her thoughts tangled between lingering hurt and a cautious, unfamiliar spark of hope. Elsewhere within the estate, hidden behind heavy wooden doors, a small group of council members gathered in secret, their voices low and urgent as they discussed the unsettling rumors spreading through Hallow Ridge. A rejected Omega, suddenly protected by the king himself, carrying a mark rumored to belong to an ancient and powerful bloodline. To some among them, this development represented an unprecedented threat to their carefully maintained positions of influence, one they were determined to address before it could grow beyond their control. Councillor Edmund Hale, a tall man with sharp features and a reputation for ruthless political maneuvering, spoke first, his voice carrying quiet authority despite the secrecy of their meeting. We cannot allow an Omega, regardless of any supposed bloodline, to gain influence over the throne, he said, his eyes scanning the small group gathered around the dimly lit table. If the rumors are true, and she truly carries the mark of the first wolves, we must control the situation before it spirals beyond our reach. Beside him, an older woman, named Counselor Priya Cade, nodded in agreement, her expression tight with concern. The pack has only just begun to recover from the tension surrounding the succession following the old king's passing, she said. The last thing we need is further instability caused by an unproven, unverified bloodline claim. And if it is proven? Asked a third voice, belonging to a younger counselor named Felix Bryant, who had remained largely silent throughout the earlier portions of their discussion. What then? Do we simply accept an Omega as our future queen, regardless of tradition? Edmund's expression darkened. That is precisely what we must prevent, he said firmly. Whether her claim is true or false matters less than the disruption it threatens to cause. King Draven already shows signs of favoring her, which puts our carefully maintained alliances at risk. Priya leaned forward, her voice dropping even lower. There are ways to handle such situations quietly, she said, without drawing unnecessary attention or suspicion. A tense silence settled over the group, as the implication of her words sank in. Felix shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly uneasy with the direction the conversation had taken, though he said nothing to object. We are not suggesting anything drastic, Edmund clarified quickly, though his tone lacked genuine conviction. Simply that we must remain vigilant, ready to act should the situation demand it. For now, we continue gathering information, understanding exactly what we are dealing with, before deciding our next course of action. The meeting concluded shortly afterward, the council members departing separately, to avoid drawing attention to their secretive gathering. Yet the seeds of a dangerous plot had already been planted, hidden beneath careful words and calculated ambiguity, waiting quietly for the right moment to fully take root. Unaware of the scheming unfolding within the shadows of the estate, Elena continued settling into her new, uncertain life over the following days. Elder Mira visited occasionally, bringing updates from her ongoing research into the old texts, though definitive answers remained frustratingly elusive. The historian explained that much of the original knowledge regarding the first wolves had been deliberately hidden or destroyed centuries earlier, likely to protect the bloodline from exactly the kind of danger Elena now faced. The texts speak of trials, Elder Mira explained one afternoon, spreading several ancient scrolls across a table in Elena's private sitting room. Moments where the bearer's power reveals itself gradually, often triggered by moments of extreme emotion, danger, or connection with their fated mate. Elena's cheeks warmed slightly at the mention of a fated mate, her mind immediately drifting toward Draven despite her best efforts to remain focused on the historical discussion. What kind of trials? She asked, forcing herself back to the matter at hand. That remains unclear, Elder Mira admitted, frustration evident in her tone. The texts are frustratingly vague on specifics, likely intentional, meant only to guide someone who has already begun awakening their abilities, rather than someone entirely unaware of their own potential. Elena sighed, running her fingers along the edge of one of the ancient scrolls, the delicate parchment crackling softly beneath her touch. It feels like every answer only leads to more questions, she said. Elder Mira offered a small, sympathetic smile. Legacy rarely reveals itself simply, she said, but patience, along with careful observation of your own instincts and reactions, may eventually reveal more than any ancient text ever could. As the days continued passing, Elena found herself growing increasingly restless within the confines of the estate. Despite Draven's continued reassurances regarding her safety, the constant presence of guards and the watchful, sometimes suspicious eyes of council members left her feeling isolated and confined. She missed the simplicity of her old life, tending gardens, mending clothes, walking freely through the familiar streets near her aunt's cottage, even if that life had also been marked by quiet loneliness and unfulfilled longing. One afternoon, unable to bear the confinement any longer, Elena decided to venture beyond her private wing, wandering through the estate's expansive gardens in search of fresh air and a brief escape from her racing thoughts. She had not gone far before she encountered Draven, seated beneath a large oak tree, reviewing several documents spread across his lap. He looked up as she approached, surprise quickly shifting into gentle concern. "Is everything all right?" he asked, setting aside his paperwork. "I simply needed some fresh air," Elena admitted, settling onto the grass a short distance away, careful to maintain a respectful distance between them, despite the growing warmth she felt whenever they spoke. The walls of the estate sometimes feel more confining than protective. Draven's expression softened with understanding. "I know the feeling well," he said. "Sometimes duty feels less like purpose and more like a cage, however necessary it might be." They spent the remainder of the afternoon together, their conversation drifting easily between lighter topics and deeper reflections on their respective childhoods, dreams, and fears. Elena found herself surprised by how easily their earlier tension seemed to dissolve during these quiet, unguarded moments, replaced instead by a growing sense of genuine connection neither of them had expected to find so soon after such a painful beginning. Yet even as their bond continued deepening, the quiet threat gathering within the shadows of Hallow Ridge's council chambers remained ever present, waiting patiently for the right opportunity to strike. Weeks passed, and Elena's days at the estate began to take on an unexpected rhythm. Mornings often began with quiet breakfasts, shared with Draven, in a small sunlit room, overlooking the eastern gardens, a habit neither of them had planned, but both had come to quietly treasure. Afternoons were spent partly with Elder Mira, poring over ancient texts in search of answers, and partly wandering the estate grounds, where Elena slowly began to feel less like an intruder, and more like someone who genuinely belonged. Despite the growing warmth between them, Elena remained cautious, unwilling to fully surrender her guarded heart after the pain of that first, devastating rejection. Yet small moments continued chipping away at her defenses, moments that revealed a side of Draven few within Hallow Ridge ever witnessed. One morning, Elena woke to find a folded note slipped beneath her door, written in careful, elegant handwriting. It read simply, "Meet me by the training grounds at sunrise, if you are willing." Curiosity outweighing her hesitation, Elena dressed quickly and made her way through the quiet, mist-covered gardens toward the estate's private training grounds, an area she had never visited before. She found Draven waiting there alone, having apparently dismissed his usual guards for the occasion. He held 2 wooden training swords, offering one toward her as she approached. "What is this?" Elena asked, eyeing the wooden blade with uncertainty. "You mentioned once that you never learned to defend yourself properly," Draven said. "I thought, perhaps, it was time that changed." Elena hesitated, memories of her helplessness during the rogue attack resurfacing uncomfortably. "I am an Omega," she said quietly. "We are not trained for combat." "You are also a descendant of the first wolves," Draven reminded her gently. "Whatever your rank within pack hierarchy, you deserve the ability to protect yourself, especially given the uncertain dangers we now face." Elena studied him for a long moment, before finally accepting the offered training sword, its wooden weight unfamiliar and slightly awkward in her grip. Draven spent the following hour patiently guiding her through basic defensive movements, his instructions calm and encouraging, entirely different from the commanding, authoritative tone he typically used when addressing pack matters. By the end of their session, Elena found herself laughing genuinely, for the first time since arriving at the estate, a rare, unguarded sound that seemed to surprise them both equally. Draven's answering smile, warm and unguarded in return, sent a fluttering warmth through her chest that she quickly attributed to simple physical exertion rather than anything deeper. These early morning training sessions soon became a regular occurrence, offering Elena not only practical skills but also a growing sense of confidence she had never previously possessed. With each passing week, she felt herself transforming slowly, shedding the quiet, timid identity she had worn for most of her life, replaced gradually by someone stronger, more assured, and increasingly aware of her own inner strength. Yet alongside this growing confidence, Elena also began experiencing strange, vivid dreams, unlike anything she had previously known. Night after night, fragmented visions filled her sleep, images of a grand wolf kingdom, long since fallen into ruin, its once magnificent halls, now crumbling beneath centuries of neglect. Within these dreams, she often heard faint whispers calling her name in an unfamiliar ancient tongue, the voices distant yet strangely comforting, as though calling her home from somewhere far beyond her current understanding. She mentioned these dreams cautiously to Elder Mira during one of their regular research sessions, uncertain whether the visions held any real significance or were simply products of her overwhelmed, anxious mind. Elder Mira listened intently, her expression growing increasingly thoughtful as Elena described the recurring imagery and whispered voices. "These dreams may be more significant than mere anxiety," the elder finally said. "The old texts occasionally reference something called ancestral memory, moments where descendants of powerful bloodlines experience fragments of their ancestors' experiences, particularly as their own latent abilities begin awakening." Elena's heart raced slightly at this explanation. "You believe I am somehow remembering things that happened to my ancestors?" "It is possible," Elder Mira said carefully, "though such phenomena are rare and poorly understood, even within our oldest historical records. I would recommend paying close attention to these dreams, recording any details you can recall upon waking. They may hold valuable insight into both your heritage and your emerging abilities." That night, Elena followed Elder Mira's advice, keeping a small journal beside her bed to document each fragment of her dreams immediately upon waking. The visions gradually became clearer with each passing night, revealing glimpses of a magnificent throne room, bathed in silver moonlight, a powerful figure standing at its center, their face obscured by shadow, yet radiating an unmistakable aura of strength and quiet authority. One particular dream stood out among the others, more vivid and unsettling than anything she had previously experienced. In this vision, Elena found herself standing amid a fierce battle, surrounded by wolves, locked in violent combat beneath a blood-red sky. She felt an overwhelming surge of power rushing through her veins, a strength unlike anything she had ever known, before the dream abruptly shifted, revealing a single, haunting image. Her own mark, glowing brilliantly upon her back, illuminating the darkness surrounding her like a beacon amid chaos. She woke gasping, her heart pounding wildly, the lingering sensation of overwhelming power still tingling beneath her skin. Unable to shake the unsettling intensity of the vision, she rose quietly, making her way through the darkened estate toward Draven's private chambers, uncertain exactly why she felt such an urgent need to see him, yet unable to resist the pull guiding her steps. She found him already awake, seated near a small window overlooking the moonlit gardens, his expression thoughtful and distant. He turned as she entered, immediately sensing her distress. "Elena, what happened?" he asked, rising quickly to meet her. "Another dream," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. But this one felt different, more real, more urgent than before. Draven guided her gently to a nearby chair, listening intently as she described the vivid imagery of battle, power, and the glowing mark she had witnessed. His expression grew increasingly serious as she spoke, concern etched deeply into his features. "These visions may be warning us of something approaching," he said carefully once she finished. "Perhaps your ancestors experienced similar battles, conflicts tied directly to the very power you now carry within yourself." Elena nodded slowly, her earlier fear gradually shifting into quiet determination. "Then perhaps it is time I stopped simply waiting for answers," she said, and started actively preparing myself for whatever challenges lie ahead. Draven studied her carefully, admiration evident in his gaze, as he witnessed the quiet strength steadily emerging within her. "Whatever comes," he said softly, "know that you will not face it alone." Elena met his gaze, something unspoken, yet deeply felt passing silently between them, a fragile but growing trust, steadily replacing the pain and uncertainty that had once defined their relationship. Though she remained cautious, unwilling to fully surrender her guarded heart, she found herself increasingly aware of just how much she had come to rely upon Draven's steady, reassuring presence amid the growing uncertainty surrounding her mysterious destiny. As the weeks continued passing, whispers regarding Elena's mysterious bloodline gradually spread beyond the small circle of trusted individuals who had originally learned of her secret. Despite Draven's continued efforts at discretion, rumors proved impossible to fully contain within a pack as tightly connected as Hallow Ridge. Soon, most within the settlement had heard some version of the story, ranging from wild exaggerations to surprisingly accurate accounts of her mysterious mark and its connection to ancient legend. With increased awareness came increased scrutiny, and Elena soon found herself facing renewed hostility from certain factions within the pack, particularly among those loyal to the more traditional council members. who viewed any potential shift in power dynamics with deep suspicion. Though Draven continued shielding her from the worst of this hostility, Elena could not entirely avoid the sharp glances and hushed, disapproving murmurs that followed her whenever she ventured beyond the estate's protective walls. Matters came to a head one evening during a formal gathering hosted within the estate's grand hall, an event meant to strengthen alliances among various pack representatives visiting from neighboring territories. Draven had insisted Elena attend, believing it important for her to begin gradually integrating into official pack functions, particularly given the growing significance of her bloodline. Elena dressed carefully for the occasion, selecting an elegant gown provided by the estate's staff, though she still felt distinctly out of place among the gathered nobility and pack leaders. As she entered the grand hall on Draven's arm, she immediately felt the weight of curious and often unfriendly stares settling upon her, whispered conversations pausing briefly as attendees took note of her presence. The evening progressed relatively smoothly at first, formal introductions and polite conversation filling the elegant hall, as musicians played softly in the background. Yet tension simmered beneath the surface, becoming increasingly apparent as the night wore on. It was Counselor Edmund Hale who finally broke the fragile peace, approaching Elena and Draven with a falsely polite smile that did little to mask the calculated challenge behind his words. "Lady Elena," he said smoothly, his tone dripping with subtle condescension. "It is quite remarkable, is it not, how swiftly circumstances have changed for someone previously rejected so publicly by our king himself." A ripple of uncomfortable silence spread through the nearby guests, several conversations halting abruptly as attention shifted toward the unfolding exchange. Elena felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment and anger, memories of that painful rejection resurfacing sharply, despite the weeks that had passed since that humiliating night. Before she could formulate a response, Draven stepped forward, his expression hardening into the commanding authority Elena had rarely witnessed directed at anyone besides herself during their earlier, more contentious encounters. "Counselor Hale," Draven said, his voice carrying clearly across the hall, "I would advise caution regarding the tone you choose to address Lady Elena. My earlier judgment regarding her position was a mistake, one I have openly acknowledged and deeply regret. I trust you would not wish to imply criticism of my own decisions as your king." Edmund's expression flickered with barely concealed frustration, clearly unprepared for such a direct and public rebuke. "Of course not, Your Majesty," he said stiffly, offering a shallow, insincere bow before retreating back into the crowd, though his cold, calculating gaze lingered briefly upon Elena, promising further complications yet to come. Elena remained quiet for a long moment after Edmund's departure, her heart still pounding from the uncomfortable confrontation. Draven turned toward her, concern evident in his gaze. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. "I am fine," Elena replied, though her voice trembled slightly. "I simply did not expect such open hostility, especially not in front of so many witnesses." "I should have anticipated this," Draven admitted, guilt flashing briefly across his features. "Edmund has never fully accepted my leadership, and he clearly views your presence as an opportunity to challenge my authority indirectly." Elena studied him carefully, appreciating the genuine concern evident in his expression, yet also recognizing the political complexity surrounding their situation. "Perhaps it would be easier," she said slowly, "if I simply avoided such gatherings altogether." "No," Draven said firmly, surprising her with the intensity of his response. "Hiding will only reinforce the perception that you are somehow unworthy or fearful. You deserve to stand proudly among our people, regardless of any lingering prejudice or political maneuvering." Elena felt a warm rush of gratitude at his words, though uncertainty still lingered within her regarding the mounting hostility she faced from certain influential members of the pack. Despite Draven's reassurances, she could not entirely shake the unsettling sense that Edmund Hale's challenge represented only the beginning of more significant conflicts yet to come. Later that evening, after the gathering finally concluded and most guests had departed, Elena found herself once again wandering the quiet estate gardens, her thoughts heavy with the events of the evening. She was surprised to find Draven waiting for her near the same stone bench where they had shared their earlier, vulnerable conversation weeks before. "I owe you an apology," Draven said as she approached, his expression thoughtful. "Tonight should have been a celebration of your growing place within our pack, Not another painful reminder of past humiliation. Elena settled onto the bench beside him, closer this time than their previous encounters, the growing familiarity between them evident in the comfortable proximity. "You have nothing to apologize for," she said gently. "You defended me tonight, publicly and without hesitation. That means more to me than you might realize." Draven turned to face her fully, his golden eyes reflecting the soft moonlight surrounding them. "I meant what I said," he continued quietly. "Rejecting you was the greatest mistake of my life, one I intend to spend as long as necessary making right." Elena's breath caught slightly at the raw sincerity evident in his voice, her earlier anger and hurt continuing to soften beneath the weight of his genuine remorse and steady devotion. Slowly, cautiously, she allowed herself to reach out, gently placing her hand atop his, a small but significant gesture, representing the fragile trust steadily rebuilding between them. "Thank you," she whispered, "for standing beside me tonight." Draven's fingers curled gently around hers, warmth spreading comfortably between their joined hands. "Always," he replied softly. They remained together beneath the moonlit sky for a while longer, the earlier tension of the evening gradually fading into quiet, comfortable silence. Yet even amid this tender, hopeful moment, Elena could not entirely dismiss the lingering unease stirred by Edmund Hale's pointed hostility, an unease that would soon prove disturbingly justified, as darker schemes continued unfolding within the shadows of Hallow Ridge's political landscape. In the days following the tense gathering within the Grand Hall, Edmund Hale gathered his closest allies once more within the same secluded chamber where their earlier conspiracy had first taken shape. This time, his tone carried a sharper edge, frustration and urgency replacing the cautious calculation of their previous meeting. "The king grows increasingly attached to this Omega," Edmund said, pacing restlessly before the small gathered group. "If we do not act soon, he may attempt to formally claim her as his mate once more, legitimizing her position, and further destabilizing the careful balance of power we have worked years to maintain." Priya Cade watched him carefully, her expression thoughtful despite the underlying tension evident in her posture. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked cautiously. Edmund paused, his gaze sweeping across the small assembly, before settling on a figure standing quietly near the room's shadowed corner, someone none of the others had noticed until this moment. A tall, thin man stepped forward, his features sharp and calculating, his presence carrying an unmistakable air of dangerous capability. "This is Victor," Edmund said simply. "He specializes in matters requiring discretion." Priya's eyes narrowed with growing unease. "Edmund, surely you are not suggesting—" "I am suggesting nothing beyond ensuring our pack's stability," Edmund interrupted smoothly, though the underlying threat remained clear despite his careful phrasing. "Victor will simply ensure certain complications. Do not continue interfering with matters of critical importance to our pack's future." Felix Bryant, who had remained silent throughout much of the previous discussions, finally spoke, his voice tight with barely restrained objection. "This goes too far, Edmund. Political maneuvering is one matter, but this is necessary." Edmund cut him off sharply, his earlier calm facade slipping to reveal the ruthless determination beneath. "If you lack the resolve necessary to protect our pack's future, Felix, perhaps you should reconsider your continued involvement in these discussions." A tense silence followed. Felix's expression conflicted, though he ultimately said nothing further, his silence serving as reluctant, uneasy acquiescence to the dangerous path Edmund had chosen to pursue. Victor stepped forward once more, his cold, calculating gaze settling briefly upon each member of the small gathering. "I will require an opportunity," he said quietly. "Somewhere the Omega will be sufficiently exposed, without excessive suspicion, falling immediately upon our efforts." Edmund nodded slowly, already formulating the beginnings of a plan. "There is a formal dinner planned within the coming weeks," he said, celebrating the anniversary of Hallow Ridge's founding. "Security, while present, will be focused primarily on external threats, rather than internal betrayal. It would provide sufficient opportunity, I believe." Victor offered a thin, unsettling smile. "Then we have our timeline." Unaware of the dangerous conspiracy steadily taking shape against her, Elena continued settling further into her evolving role within Hallow Ridge, her confidence and abilities gradually strengthening under Draven's continued guidance and support. Their morning training sessions had progressed significantly, Elena now capable of defending herself with genuine skill, rather than desperate, untrained instinct alone. Beyond physical training, Elena also found herself growing increasingly comfortable navigating the complex political landscape surrounding pack leadership, gradually shedding the quiet, uncertain demeanor she had carried throughout most of her life. Elder Mira continued guiding her through additional historical research, though definitive answers regarding the full scope of her abilities remained frustratingly elusive. One afternoon, while reviewing several particularly old and fragile texts, Elder Mira paused thoughtfully, her attention drawn to a specific passage she had apparently overlooked during previous research sessions. "Elena," she said slowly, "listen to this carefully." She read aloud a passage describing an ancient ritual, capable of fully awakening a first wolf descendant's dormant abilities, though the ritual itself required specific, rare circumstances, difficult to replicate intentionally. The bond between fated mates, Elder Mira explained further, combined with genuine emotional vulnerability and significant personal danger, appears capable of triggering rapid, powerful awakening within descendants who have not yet fully accessed their inherited abilities. Elena's cheeks flushed slightly at the mention of fated mates, her thoughts immediately drifting toward Draven, despite her continued efforts to maintain emotional distance and caution. "You believe such circumstances might eventually occur naturally?" she asked carefully. "It is possible," Elder Mira admitted, "though I would caution against actively seeking dangerous situations simply to hasten your development. True strength often emerges organically, shaped by genuine experience rather than forced circumstance." Elena nodded thoughtfully, though she could not entirely dismiss a lingering sense of unease regarding Elder Mira's warning about danger and vulnerability. Given the strange, vivid dreams she continued experiencing, along with the underlying tension she still sensed within certain factions of Hallow Ridge's political landscape, she suspected such dangerous circumstances might arise regardless of her own intentions. That evening, Draven visited her private chambers, his expression carrying unusual seriousness as he settled into the chair opposite hers. "I have decided," he began carefully, "that it is time to formally reclaim you as my mate." Elena's heart raced at his sudden declaration, surprise and cautious hope mingling within her chest. "Draven, are you certain? The council remains deeply divided, and such a decision could further destabilize." "I am certain," Draven interrupted gently, though firmly. "I have spent enough time allowing fear and political calculation to dictate my choices. Whatever consequences follow, I refuse to continue denying what my heart has already recognized as truth." Elena studied him carefully, searching for any hesitation or uncertainty within his steady gaze, finding only quiet, resolute conviction. Slowly, the walls she had carefully maintained around her heart since that painful rejection began crumbling further, replaced instead by cautious, hopeful trust. "I would like that," she finally admitted softly, "more than I think I have allowed myself to acknowledge until now." Draven's expression softened into genuine relief and quiet joy, reaching gently to take her hand within his own. "Then let us proceed carefully," he said, choosing the right moment to formally announce our bond before the entire pack, ensuring this time there can be no doubt regarding my commitment. They decided together that the upcoming anniversary celebration, already planned to honor Hallow Ridge's founding, would provide the perfect opportunity for such a significant, public declaration. Neither of them yet realized the danger quietly awaiting them within that very same gathering, danger carefully orchestrated by those determined to prevent their union at any cost. The night of the anniversary celebration arrived with an air of festive anticipation spreading throughout Hallow Ridge. The grand hall had been transformed into a dazzling display of golden light and elegant decoration, long tables laden with carefully prepared dishes, musicians filling the air with joyful, celebratory melodies. Elena dressed carefully for the occasion, her nerves fluttering, with a mixture of excitement and lingering apprehension regarding the significant announcement planned for later that evening. Draven met her outside the grand hall, his expression warm with unmistakable affection as he took in her appearance. "You look radiant," he said softly, offering his arm as they prepared to enter together. "I am nervous," Elena admitted quietly, though a small, genuine smile tugged at her lips despite her uncertainty. "There is no need," Draven reassured her gently. "Tonight, we simply reclaim what should never have been denied in the first place." They entered the grand hall together, immediately drawing the attention of the assembled guests. curious whispers rippling through the crowd, as pack members and visiting dignitaries alike took note of their arrival. Elena kept her composure carefully, drawing strength from Draven's steady presence beside her, as they made their way toward the head table. The evening progressed smoothly at first, formal toasts honoring Hallowridge's founding, accompanied by warm applause and genuine celebration. Elena gradually relaxed, finding herself enjoying the festive atmosphere despite her earlier nervousness, particularly as she noticed several previously hostile pack members offering cautiously polite acknowledgement in her direction. It was during the main course, as servers moved quietly between tables refilling glasses and delivering carefully prepared dishes, that Victor made his move, his presence among the estate's temporary catering staff having gone entirely unnoticed amid the evening's festivities. With practiced precision, he slipped a carefully measured amount of poison into Elena's glass as he refilled it, the substance dissolving instantly and invisibly within the rich, dark wine. Elena, engaged in pleasant conversation with several guests nearby, took a sip from her glass without any hint of suspicion, the poison's effects remaining undetectable for several critical minutes before finally beginning to take hold. The first sign of trouble came subtly, a slight dizziness washing over her as she attempted to respond to a question posed by one of the visiting dignitaries. She blinked rapidly, attempting to clear her suddenly blurred vision, though the sensation only intensified, her stomach twisting with sudden sharp discomfort. "Elena?" Draven's voice reached her, as though from a great distance, concern immediately evident in his tone, as he noticed her sudden paleness. "Are you all right?" She attempted to respond, though her words emerged slurred and disjointed, her vision continuing to darken at the edges as her body swayed unsteadily. Draven caught her just as her legs finally gave way beneath her, panic flooding his features as he lowered her carefully to the ground, shouting urgently for assistance. "Someone get the healer, now," he commanded, his voice carrying sharp, desperate authority across the suddenly chaotic hall. Guests scattered in alarm, whispered gasps and frightened murmurs filling the air, as Draven cradled Elena's rapidly weakening form against his chest. "Elena, stay with me," he pleaded, his voice breaking, with barely restrained panic, as her eyes began fluttering closed. "Please, stay with me." The pack healer arrived within moments, quickly assessing Elena's rapidly deteriorating condition, his expression grim as he confirmed Draven's worst fears. "She has been poisoned," he said urgently. "I do not recognize this particular toxin. I am uncertain whether conventional treatment will prove effective." Desperation flooded through Draven as he watched Elena's breathing grow increasingly shallow, her skin turning alarmingly pale beneath his trembling hands. He knew of only one remaining option, a dangerous, forbidden practice passed down through generations of Alpha Kings, rarely used due to the significant personal risk involved. Without hesitation, Draven began channeling deep, ancient healing magic directly into Elena's failing body, a technique requiring him to share significant portions of his own life force in order to counteract the poison's deadly effects. The surrounding guests watched in stunned silence as visible energy crackled faintly around Draven's hands, his expression tightening with evident strain as he poured every ounce of his strength into saving her. Minutes passed in agonizing uncertainty, Draven's own breathing growing increasingly labored as the dangerous healing process continued draining his own vitality. Just as exhaustion threatened to overwhelm him entirely, Elena's eyes finally fluttered open, her breathing gradually stabilizing as color slowly began returning to her previously pale features. "Draven?" she whispered weakly, confusion evident in her hazy gaze. Relief flooded through him so intensely, he nearly collapsed alongside her, exhaustion from the dangerous healing ritual, finally catching up with his own depleted strength. "I am here," he said softly, gently brushing hair away from her face. "You are safe now." The healer quickly confirmed Elena's stabilizing condition, though he insisted both she and Draven required immediate rest and careful monitoring following such a dangerous ordeal. Guards swiftly secured the hall, launching an urgent investigation into the poisoning attempt, though Victor had already slipped away amid the earlier chaos, his identity and true purpose remaining hidden for the time being. As Elena rested within her private chambers over the following days, slowly recovering from the poisoning's lingering effects, Draven remained constantly by her side, his earlier exhaustion replaced by fierce, protective determination. The attempt on her life had shattered any remaining hesitation regarding his feelings, replacing careful political calculation with unwavering, absolute commitment toward her safety and well-being. "I should have anticipated this," he said quietly one evening, sitting beside her bed as she slowly regained her strength. "I allowed political concerns to blind me toward the very real danger surrounding you." Elena reached out weakly, taking his hand within her own. "You saved my life," she said softly. "Whatever mistakes were made, you more than corrected them tonight." Draven's grip tightened gently around her hand, his expression fierce with quiet resolve. "I will find whoever did this," he promised, "and I will ensure they face full consequences for their actions." Elena studied him carefully, recognizing the genuine depth of emotion behind his determined words. Whatever lingering doubts she had once carried regarding his commitment toward her had been thoroughly extinguished by the desperate, selfless act of healing he had performed, risking his own life without hesitation to save hers. "Draven," she said softly, "I need to know something, honestly, without political consideration or hesitation clouding your answer." He met her gaze steadily, his expression open and unguarded. "Anything," he replied. "Do you want me?" she asked carefully. "Because you truly desire me as your mate, or simply because of the power my bloodline might offer our pack?" Draven's expression softened further, genuine emotion evident in his golden eyes, as he considered her question carefully before responding. "Elena," he said quietly, "my wolf recognized you as my mate long before either of us understood anything about your bloodline or hidden abilities. I rejected you out of fear, weakness, and misguided duty, not because my heart ever doubted the truth my instincts recognized immediately. I want you, completely and entirely, for exactly who you are, regardless of any power or legacy attached to your name." Elena felt tears gathering in her eyes, relief and overwhelming emotion finally breaking through the careful walls she had maintained since that painful rejection. "Then I choose you as well," she whispered, "completely, and without reservation." Draven leaned forward gently, pressing a soft, tender kiss against her forehead, relief and quiet joy evident in his tightened embrace. Whatever dangers still lingered ahead, whatever uncertain destiny awaited them both, they would face it together, their bond finally strengthened by genuine trust, honesty, and unwavering commitment toward one another. In the days following the poisoning attempt, Draven launched a thorough and relentless investigation into the identity of the mysterious catering staff member who had vanished amid the chaos of that terrifying night. Guards questioned every available witness, examined every document tied to the temporary staff hired for the anniversary celebration, and gradually began piecing together a troubling picture of deliberate, calculated betrayal, originating from within the pack's own political structure. Felix Bryant, racked with guilt over his reluctant involvement in Edmund's dangerous scheme, finally approached Draven privately several days after the incident, his expression heavy with evident remorse. "Your Majesty," Felix began nervously, "there is something you need to know regarding the attempt on Lady Elena's life." Draven's expression hardened immediately, sensing the gravity of what Felix was about to reveal. "Speak freely," he commanded firmly. "Whatever guilt you carry, honesty now will serve you far better than continued silence." Felix nodded, swallowing hard before recounting the secretive meetings he had witnessed, detailing Edmund Hale's growing obsession with preventing Elena's rise to power, along with the mysterious figure known only as Victor, hired specifically to eliminate what Edmund perceived as a dangerous threat to the council's established influence. Draven listened with mounting fury, his hands clenching tightly at his sides, as the full scope of the betrayal became clear. "Edmund orchestrated this," he said quietly, his voice dangerously controlled, despite the fierce anger evident beneath his measured tone. "Yes," Felix confirmed, his voice trembling slightly. "I should have spoken sooner. I am deeply sorry for my silence." Draven studied him carefully, recognizing the genuine remorse evident in Felix's demeanor. "Your honesty now will be remembered," he said finally. "But know that your continued silence nearly cost Elena her life. I expect your full cooperation moving forward, without hesitation or further concealment." Felix nodded eagerly, relief evident in his expression at Draven's measured, though still clearly furious, response. Armed with this crucial information, Draven ordered Edmund Hale's immediate arrest, guards swiftly moving to detain the counselor within his private chambers, before he could attempt any further scheming or escape. Edmund's arrogant composure crumbled quickly, once confronted with the evidence against him, his desperate attempts at justification falling on entirely unsympathetic ears. "I acted only to protect our pack's stability," Edmund insisted, as guards led him toward the estate's secure holding chambers. "An Omega, regardless of bloodline, threatens the very foundation of our traditional structure." "You attempted to murder an innocent woman," Draven replied coldly, his earlier restraint finally giving way to open, righteous fury. "Whatever justification you believe you possess, know that your actions will face full consequences under our pack's laws." With Edmund secured and formal charges swiftly prepared against him, Halloridge slowly began settling back into a fragile sense of normalcy, though the unsettling revelation of such deep political betrayal left lingering unease throughout the pack. Elena, having fully recovered from the poisoning's dangerous effects, found herself both relieved by Edmund's capture and increasingly aware of the significant dangers still surrounding her newfound identity. Yet even as this immediate threat was addressed, a far greater danger had already begun stirring beyond Halloridge's borders, one neither Elena nor Draven yet fully understood. Word of Elena's mysterious bloodline had traveled far beyond the confines of their own pack, whispered rumors spreading steadily among neighboring territories, until they finally reached the ears of King Alaric Thorn, ruler of the powerful and ambitious Blackthorn Kingdom, located several days' journey beyond Halloridge's borders. Alaric had long harbored ambitions of expanding his own territory and influence, and the possibility of capturing or eliminating a genuine descendant of the legendary First Wolves presented an opportunity far too significant to ignore. Within Blackthorn's own Grand Hall, Alaric gathered his most trusted advisors and military commanders, his expression sharp with calculated ambition as he outlined his intentions. "If this Omega truly carries the mark of the First Wolves," Alaric said, pacing thoughtfully before his assembled council, "her power, properly controlled, could secure our kingdom's dominance for generations to come. Alternatively, should she prove unwilling to cooperate, her elimination would prevent Halloridge from gaining such a significant advantage." His most trusted general, a formidable warrior named Cassius Drake, nodded in agreement, his expression calculating. "Shall I begin preparing our forces, Your Majesty?" "Yes," Alaric confirmed decisively. Quietly, at first. "I want scouts dispatched immediately to confirm the truth behind these rumors, before we commit to more significant action. If the girl truly possesses such power, we move swiftly, before Halloridge has adequate opportunity to fully understand or harness her potential themselves." Within days, Blackthorn scouts began quietly infiltrating the outskirts of Halloridge territory, carefully observing pack movements, and gathering whatever information they could regarding Elena's mysterious abilities and her relationship with King Draven. Their reports, delivered swiftly back to Alaric, confirmed the unsettling truth. Elena's bloodline appeared genuine, her connection to the ancient legend increasingly undeniable. Satisfied with this confirmation, Alaric began finalizing more aggressive plans, assembling a significant portion of his kingdom's military forces under the guise of routine border patrols, careful to avoid drawing premature attention from Halloridge's own defenses. His ultimate goal remained clear: capture Elena, secure her powerful bloodline for Blackthorn's benefit, and eliminate any resistance Halloridge might attempt to offer in her defense. Unaware of the gathering storm steadily approaching from beyond their borders, Elena and Draven continued focusing on rebuilding trust and stability within their own pack, following Edmund's exposed betrayal. Yet the peace they had fought so hard to reclaim would soon prove tragically short-lived, as the true scope of the danger surrounding Elena's extraordinary destiny finally began revealing itself in full, devastating force. The attack came just before dawn, when the sky still held the deep purple hues of night, and most of Halloridge remained peacefully asleep, unaware of the approaching danger. Blackthorn forces, led personally by General Cassius Drake, moved swiftly and silently through the surrounding forest, their numbers significant enough to overwhelm Halloridge's standard perimeter defenses before any meaningful warning could be raised. The first sign of trouble came in the form of a piercing alarm horn, sounded desperately by a border guard who had narrowly spotted the approaching forces before being overwhelmed himself. The urgent, wailing sound tore through the quiet morning air, jolting the entire pack awake with sudden, panicked urgency. Draven was instantly alert, years of trained instinct propelling him from his bed the moment the alarm began sounding. "Elena," he called urgently, already moving toward his weapons and armor. "Wake up, now. We are under attack." Elena scrambled from her own bed, adrenaline instantly clearing away any remaining traces of sleep as she quickly dressed, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and fierce determination. She met Draven in the hallway moments later, both of them moving swiftly toward the estate's main courtyard, where pack warriors were already beginning to assemble in hurried, chaotic formation. "Blackthorn forces," a scout reported breathlessly as they arrived, "moving in from the eastern border, significant numbers, already engaging our perimeter guards." Draven's expression hardened with grim determination as he quickly began issuing orders, organizing Hallow Ridge's warriors into defensive formations despite the chaotic, disorienting circumstances of the sudden assault. Elena watched, her earlier fear steadily transforming into fierce resolve as she recognized the desperate need for every available defender, regardless of rank or traditional expectation. "I am fighting alongside you," she said firmly, meeting Draven's concerned gaze with unwavering determination. "Elena, it is too dangerous. I have trained for weeks, specifically for moments like this," she interrupted firmly. "I refuse to hide while our people fight and potentially die defending our home. Let me help." Draven studied her for a long moment, recognizing the fierce determination evident in her expression, before finally nodding in reluctant agreement. "Stay close to me," he said firmly. "Whatever happens." Together, they moved toward the eastern border, where the fiercest fighting had already begun, the clash of warriors filling the early morning air with the sounds of battle, growls, and desperate shouts. Blackthorn forces pressed forward with disciplined, overwhelming numbers, gradually pushing Hallow Ridge's defenders backward, despite their fierce, determined resistance. Elena fought alongside Draven with newfound confidence, her weeks of training finally proving their worth, as she defended herself and assisted fellow warriors against the relentless assault. Yet despite her growing skill, the sheer number of Blackthorn forces continued threatening to overwhelm Hallow Ridge's defenses, the battle steadily tilting toward a devastating, costly defeat. It was General Cassius Drake himself who eventually located Elena amid the chaotic battlefield, recognizing her immediately from the detailed scouting reports Blackthorn had gathered in preparation for this very assault. He moved toward her with calculated, predatory precision, clearly intent on capturing her before Hallow Ridge's forces could mount any effective defense. "You are coming with me," Cassius said coldly, blocking her path with imposing, threatening presence. Elena's heart raced, though she refused to allow fear to overwhelm her newfound resolve. "I am not going anywhere," she replied firmly, raising her weapon defensively. Cassius lunged forward with practiced, brutal efficiency, and Elena barely managed to avoid his initial attack, her training allowing her to dodge and counter, though she remained clearly overmatched against his significant combat experience. Draven, noticing her sudden peril, fought desperately to reach her, though the surrounding chaos of battle made progress agonizingly slow. As Cassius pressed his advantage, striking a painful blow that sent Elena stumbling backward, something within her finally shifted, an overwhelming surge of desperate protective instinct rushing through her veins. The mark upon her back suddenly ignited with intense blazing heat, brilliant golden light erupting outward from beneath her clothing, illuminating the surrounding battlefield with radiant, otherworldly power. Cassius stumbled backward in stunned disbelief as Elena rose again, her eyes now glowing with the same brilliant golden light emanating from her mark, an aura of undeniable, ancient power surrounding her entire being. She felt strength flooding through her body, unlike anything she had previously experienced, her senses sharpening dramatically, her connection to her wolf deepening into something far beyond her previous understanding. "What are you?" Cassius demanded, though genuine fear had finally crept into his previously confident tone. "I am exactly who I was always meant to become," Elena replied, her voice carrying newfound authority and strength. She moved with startling speed and precision, her previously limited combat skills suddenly enhanced by the awakened power flowing through her veins. Cassius, despite his considerable experience, found himself struggling desperately against her newfound abilities, his earlier confidence rapidly crumbling beneath her fierce, determined assault. Around them, Hallow Ridge warriors watched in stunned amazement as Elena's radiant power began turning the tide of the entire battle, her presence inspiring renewed courage among her fellow defenders, while simultaneously instilling fear among the advancing Blackthorn forces. Draven finally reached her side, awe and fierce pride evident in his expression, as he witnessed her incredible transformation. Together, they fought with renewed determination, Elena's awakened abilities combining powerfully with Draven's own considerable strength and leadership. Gradually, the tide of battle began shifting decisively in Halloridge's favor. Blackthorn forces steadily retreating under the combined, overwhelming assault of Elena's newfound power and Halloridge's renewed, inspired resistance. Recognizing the battle rapidly turning against him, Cassius finally called for a full retreat, Blackthorn forces withdrawing swiftly back toward their own territory, their earlier confidence shattered by the unexpected, devastating power Elena had unleashed against them. As the last remnants of the attacking force disappeared beyond the tree line, exhausted cheers erupted throughout Halloridge's surviving defenders, relief and disbelief mingling powerfully among the assembled warriors. Elena, her earlier golden radiance gradually fading as the immediate danger passed, felt overwhelming exhaustion finally catching up with her newly awakened abilities. Draven caught her gently as her knees weakened, lowering her carefully to the ground amid the quiet aftermath of battle. "You saved us," he said softly, awe and profound gratitude evident in his voice. "You saved everyone." Elena managed a tired, genuine smile despite her exhaustion. "We saved each other," she replied softly, before exhaustion finally overwhelmed her entirely, her eyes closing, as Draven gathered her protectively into his arms, carrying her carefully back toward the safety of the estate, amid the quiet, grateful celebration of Halloridge's hard-won, unexpected victory. Elena woke slowly, sunlight streaming gently through the tall windows of her private chambers, the events of the battle returning to her mind, in vivid, overwhelming fragments. She sat up carefully, surprised to find her body already feeling remarkably restored, whatever exhaustion had overwhelmed her, following the awakening of her powers seemingly already fading. Draven sat nearby, having apparently kept watch over her throughout her recovery, relief flooding his features the moment he noticed her stirring awake. "You are finally awake," he said softly, moving quickly to her side. "How do you feel?" "Surprisingly well," Elena admitted, testing her strength carefully as she rose from the bed. "Stronger, somehow, than I have ever felt before." Draven studied her carefully, admiration and quiet wonder evident in his expression. "Your abilities fully awakened during the battle," he explained. "Elder Mira believes the danger, combined with our bond, triggered exactly the kind of transformation the ancient text described." Elena absorbed this information slowly, gradually recalling the incredible surge of power she had experienced, the golden light, the newfound strength and clarity that had allowed her to successfully defend both herself and her adopted home. "It felt like finally understanding who I was always meant to become," she said quietly. "You were remarkable," Draven said, his voice thick with genuine pride and admiration. "Halloridge owes you a debt we can never fully repay." Elena smiled softly, though a flicker of concern remained evident in her expression. "What of Blackthorn?" she asked. "Will they attempt another assault?" Draven's expression grew more serious. "It is possible," he admitted, "though your demonstrated power during the battle will likely give them significant pause before attempting further aggression. Regardless, we will remain vigilant, strengthening our defenses and alliances moving forward." Elena nodded, appreciating his honesty despite the lingering uncertainty regarding future threats. Yet amid this uncertainty, she also felt a profound sense of clarity and purpose she had never previously experienced. Her earlier insecurities regarding her place within Halloridge, finally replaced by genuine confidence in her own strength and worth. News of Elena's incredible display of power during the battle spread rapidly throughout Halloridge, transforming public perception almost entirely. Where suspicion and quiet hostility had once greeted her, genuine respect and gratitude now followed wherever she walked, pack members eager to express their appreciation for her decisive role in securing their victory against Blackthorn's forces. With Edmund Hale's earlier betrayal fully exposed and formally addressed through Halloridge's traditional justice system, and with Blackthorn's aggressive ambitions decisively repelled, Draven finally decided the time had come to formally and publicly reclaim Elena as his true mate, undoing at last the painful rejection that had first brought them together under such difficult circumstances. The ceremony took place within the same grand hall where Elena had once suffered such devastating public humiliation, though this time, the atmosphere carried none of the earlier tension or uncertainty. Every seat within the hall was filled, pack members eager to witness the long-awaited, formal recognition of their king's true and rightful mate. Elena stood once more at the center of the stone floor, though this time, she felt none of the fear or vulnerability that had once overwhelmed her during that painful first ceremony. Instead, she stood tall and confident, dressed in elegant robes befitting her newly recognized status, her earlier uncertainty replaced entirely by quiet, unwavering strength. Draven descended from the raised platform, moving directly toward her with steady, purposeful strides, his golden eyes reflecting deep, genuine love and admiration as he finally stood before her once more. "Elena Voss," he began, his voice carrying clearly and confidently across the silent, attentive hall. "I once made the grave mistake of rejecting the truth my heart had already recognized, allowing fear and misguided duty to overshadow what I knew, even then, to be undeniable. Today, before our entire pack, I correct that mistake fully and completely." He reached gently for her hands, holding them securely within his own as he continued, his voice steady with genuine conviction. "I claim you, Elena, as my true and rightful mate, my equal in strength and leadership, and the future queen of Hallowridge, exactly as fate always intended." Elena felt tears of genuine joy gathering in her eyes as she listened to his heartfelt declaration, the pain of that earlier rejection, finally, fully healed by the depth of sincerity evident in his words. "I accept," she said softly, her voice carrying clearly, despite her emotion. Completely, and without reservation. The hall erupted into joyful applause and celebration as Draven leaned forward, sealing their renewed bond with a tender, heartfelt kiss, the assembled pack witnessing at last the true and rightful union fate had always intended for their king and his extraordinary mate. In the months that followed, Elena settled fully into her new role as queen, her once quiet, uncertain nature transformed into confident, capable leadership that quickly earned genuine respect throughout Hallowridge. She worked closely alongside Draven, strengthening their pack's defenses, forging renewed alliances with neighboring territories, wary of Blackthorn's earlier aggression, and continuing to explore the full scope of her incredible ancestral abilities under Elder Mira's continued guidance. Word of her remarkable powers and her decisive role in defending Hallowridge spread throughout the wider Wolf Kingdoms, earning cautious respect and renewed diplomatic interest from territories previously indifferent toward Hallowridge's political standing. Elena embraced her newfound legacy fully, determined to use her unique abilities not for personal power or ambition, but for genuine protection and unity among packs long divided by fear, tradition, and misunderstanding. Draven, too, found himself transformed by their shared journey, his earlier rigid adherence to duty and tradition softened by genuine love and profound respect for Elena's remarkable strength and wisdom. Together, they led Hallowridge into a new era of unprecedented stability and prosperity, their partnership serving as a powerful example of the strength found not in rigid tradition, but in genuine trust, honesty, and unwavering devotion. Years later, Elena would often reflect on that painful, humiliating night when Draven first rejected her before their entire pack, recognizing now how that devastating moment had ultimately led her toward discovering her true, extraordinary destiny. The pain of rejection had given way to profound purpose, quiet insecurity, replaced by unwavering strength, and a fractured, uncertain bond, transformed into an unbreakable partnership built upon genuine love, mutual respect, and shared resilience. Hallowridge flourished under their combined leadership, its people secure in the knowledge that their king and queen stood united, ready to face whatever future challenges might arise, their bond stronger than any prophecy, any ancient legend, or any lingering doubt that had once threatened to keep them apart. In the end, fate had proven exactly what Elena's wolf had recognized from that very first moment, that some bonds, however difficult their beginning, were always destined to become unbreakable.